What's up, YouTubes? This is Cliff here. So last video I just gave a kind of brief introduction to what's going on here with this Mac Classic 2 and the restoration of that. The goal here is really to replace the electrolytic capacitors on the motherboard and replace those with these brand new here tantalum capacitors of various sizes. I've got 3 sizes to match the 3 different types of capacitors on the board. If you look again, that's these guys here, these silver canisters. And if you look really close, let's see if I can zoom in and get you to see that there. They've got different markings. Some have little number 10, some of them say 47, some of them say 1. That's the capacitance level in microfarads. And then there's a voltage level for each one of those. I've counted out the various different types of capacitors. Again, there's only 3 types. Three levels and a couple different voltages. Most of them are 16 volts. Some of them are 50 volts. There's only 2 of them at that voltage level. So the plan is to replace those because they leak. And over time, the board stops functioning. You can actually see over here, it's kind of hard to see in the video, but the leads to some of these components are nice and shiny the way they should be. And some of these are kind of fouled up. They look gunky. And they only seem to look gunky and messy around these large capacitors. See all that in there? So this brush I'm actually going to use with alcohol once I get the capacitors off, and we'll clean that up a little bit, see if we can make that look prettier. Let's see. So next steps basically are, I've got 2 soldering irons here, and again 2 soldering irons because we're going to apply heat on either side of each one of these capacitors. So starting with maybe the 47 microfarads, put one on that side with the heat, melt it, and then pop that capacitor right off there. I'm also using my little alligator clippy thingy. Some people call it the helping hands. I'll just use the alligator clips there to give me a little bit of an assist. Maybe grab a hold of the capacitors, I'll pull the board up just a little bit so when the heat melts the solder, the board will drop down. I'll take advantage of gravity. So that's the immediate term. I'm going to get this set up, and then you can join me once I got that set up, and we'll see how the first one goes. This is all an experiment. One other thing I want to mention too is I won't need a lot of solder here because I'm going to be just using a little tiny bit to make sure you get good heat conductance from the soldering irons. This is just regular cheesy Radio Shack special 6040 tin lead solder. The other thing to have is safety glasses. It's really important. This solder, anytime you're using solder and putting it on irons, it tends to splatter, and you know, it can get in your eyes. It'd be bad, so we don't want that to happen. The other thing too is nice wet sponge to help wipe off the soldering iron after you use it and get all the old solder off there. So join me back in just a couple seconds here and we'll be good to go. And boom, so we're back. I just got my little alligator clip set here, got my safety glasses on, and it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a tight fit, so I'm going to start with these large 47 microfarad 16 volt capacitors, and it's going to be a tight fit to get the soldering iron in between there, right on the pads, and apply a little bit of heat. The board is lifted off the cardboard here, just maybe 1/4 of an inch or so, and so hopefully that'll be certainly enough for gravity to take action. So let's just put a little touch of solder on our soldering irons here. These are brand new little 25 watt specials, and stretch that out a bit. Let's do the other one too, just to help with getting that initial heat conduction going. We'll see how this goes. These are brand new, so I burnt all the oil off there and whatever. All right, so let's get this one here, and nice tangle of wires. See what happens. Got a little bit of extra, so some of the extra solder there and see what happens. If I can get in here and here. There's 1, 2. Tricky. Not quite getting enough heat in there. Let's see if I can get a little more solder on there. Get some better conduction. Just need a little bit right on the very ends here so you can see that. I want to get in the board here. See if we can get that to stick just a bit better right on the tip. Maybe. Let's do the same on this other guy and try again. smoky stuff. All right, let's see. All right, got that guy. Let's get this one right on the pad. There we go. Hey, look at that. That worked. All right, so it just took a few seconds. Let's move this out of the way. So there's the capacitor right in there. And we can pop that guy off there. All right, there it is. Ooh, that's hot. And there's the pads on the board right there that we just pulled off. So hopefully that shows up okay. One down, I don't know, 13 or 14 to go. But again, because the labeling on the circuit board doesn't clearly indicate the size, I'm going to just start with our 47 microfarad capacitors first, replace those, and then switch to the other types and just work my way a little bit at a time. Next step 2 is I'm going to take my brush and some isopropyl alcohol and see if we can clean up these leads right here, just to kind of get rid of the gunk that's on there. See how that comes out. All right, more to come. Okay, back once again. I now have some rubbing alcohol, just regular isopropyl on here from the drugstore, and my trusty brush. So with safety glasses back on, let's go ahead and do that, and let's just see what we can do to clean up this this area of the board right in here. It's really hard to see, so I'll see if I can hold it close enough. There's just that area right in there that's pretty messy, so we'll see what we can do to clean that up, and hopefully alcohol will help. So this brush, it's a kind of expensive little one, but it's got a couple different types of, this is more of a beveled edge, and this is just a regular flat brushy part. So let's try the beveled edge first, just see what happens. And just get in there, scrub a little bit. Looks better at first glance, quite a bit actually. Just get that whole area maybe. And also get the area underneath the, where that old capacitor was. So this is just the one 47 microfarad that I pulled, and make sure we get that all nice and cleaned up. So let's see if we can get the area around here too. Any other spots? Probably enough for now. Let's let that dry. But if you can see, I'll hold it in right up close where we were, right there, and definitely looks a lot cleaner than it was. Here's another area again. I'll clean this up area, this area up too. Why don't we just do that while that capacitor is still there? I'll just show you what it looks like. So pretty messy. Let's get a little more alcohol. And both sides of this thing have dirt on them, so I'm gonna get both sides of this little IC. Get in there with that brush. Definitely be better to get the capacitor out of the way first, of course. But I'll show you what that looks like. So now, if I get this up close to the camera, right in there, that's what we just cleaned up. And not perfect, we'll get this capacitor out of the way and make it better, but that's definitely improvement. And we can let that dry off and keep working on the rest of these large capacitors, and then we'll replace them. So back in a few. All right, welcome back. So I've finally managed to get all 3 of those 47 microfarad capacitors off of the board. That was good. You can see this was the hardest one, a little bit of melting, but not too bad. For that connector, that's the Apple Talk connector for the, at least for the keyboard and mouse. That's what was the capacitor there, and actually to get access in there, I actually had to remove a 10 microfarad capacitor just to get that out of the way so I could get in there. But I've cleaned it up, and if I get in real close and tight here, you can see it looks pretty good. One other thing to note is those little plus symbols, and if you look, every capacitor on the board, if I'll move over here, has got a little plus sign to indicate the positive side, and the black bar on each of these electrolytic capacitors is the negative side. Here's the new tantalum capacitors, and they also have a bar for the negative side. So I'll put each one of those in position, and they'll look something like, if I get it right here, about like roughly that. I'll put it in position with some needle nose just to kind of position it first, but we'll drop a little bit of solder in there, and they should sit in very nicely. One thing I plan to do too is, let me grab my needle nose now just to get this guy out of the way. I'm going to put just a little bit of solder on each of these, fresh solder on each of these pads here, and that way when I set the capacitor on there, I'll just apply a little heat and they should just settle right in. I don't have to do a whole lot there. That's the plan. We'll see what happens. I've also taken alcohol in there and cleaned these areas up for where I remove these parts, and they should be good to go. We'll see what happens. All right.